Hi, welcome to History with Mr. E. And today we're going to talk about part 2 of section 20.4, and it's going to be about President Truman's presidency. Truman worked hard after the war, to weaken the labor unions that had gained so much footing, and he wanted it to be so that you didn't have to join a labor union to be hired. Unions were still permitted, but you didn't have to join a labor union just to get a job. He left that up state to state. That was the Taft-Hartley Act that made that possible. Before, if you weren't part of a union, you couldn't get a job that made you any money at all. In the 1948 election, Truman won won re-election after a whistle-stop campaign. He went in a train 31,000 miles and gave 350 different speeches to every part of the nation. And it was still a close race. He wanted to keep up with some of FDR's policies, but not all of them. So he started something called the Fair Deal rather than the New Deal. It expanded Social Security. It failed to pass a minimum wage. A minimum wage would have been really great, but labor unions probably put a stop to that. And it also ended segregation in the armed forces, which is a pretty cool thing. In 1948, President Truman fought very hard to reestablish Israel as a nation, granted lands to the Jews, and made it an independent state. But this caused anti-Semitism throughout the world. People that hate Jewish people throughout the world, and of course, a state of almost constant warfare between the people that he kicked out of Israel and the people that were now living in their new nation. Communism in our Cold War actually led to two wars. The first of which is a fight in North Korea, which happened just less than 5 years after the war had ended, World War II had ended. North Korea was and still is communist, and South Korea was and still is a free republic. In 1950, the communists wanted to seize more lands from South Korea and invaded South Korea and then refused to leave. The United Nations sent an army of mostly U.S. soldiers, but including soldiers from 15 other countries, and drew a line called the Pusan Perimeter. There was a last stand there, and then they fought at Incheon near the city of Seoul and forced North Korea out of Seoul. Now, the South Korean troops that had survived the last stand at Pusan met with the North Koreans and the U.S., and the North Korean army fell to pieces. And by October, General MacArthur had actually attacked North Korea. But then the Chinese started sending troops, and even though MacArthur wanted to invade China to fight against them also, it would have started another global war. So Truman forced MacArthur to retreat to South Korea. That war lasted 3 years. If they could have taken North Korea, which they couldn't have because it would have started a war with China, it could have ended a lot of problems in that area. But then at the same time, we may have been forced to fight China for years afterwards. We're still arguing with North Korea. 33,000 died in a 3-year war before they signed a truce. And today's was really short, and I hope we didn't rush it too much, and I hope that you take some time to go on Wikipedia, maybe, and look up the Korean conflict and see all the things that really happened during that war, because we really brushed through it today. Have a good weekend. Do your questions.